You've definitely seen Black Opium all over TikTok and Sephora, but let's talk about the YSL perfume that started it all. 1977's Opium. If you missed parts 1 and 2, check them out on the YSL playlist below. And where we left off, Yves Saint Laurent made a splash with his nude ad for Pour Homme. For what would become the brand's magnum opus of fragrance, here's what Yves said. After the fragrance Y, I wanted a lush, heavy, and languid perfume. I wanted opium to be captivating, and I wanted its scent to evoke everything I like: the sophisticated Orient, imperial China, and exoticism. Let's start with how opium came about. The name opium was decided upon and the rights purchased before they even had the juice. Yves had a singular vision for perfume to fit his vision of what constituted Asian exoticism, and it was created to coincide with the launch of his Choiset collection. Pretty sure I said that wrong, but here are some of the pieces from that collection. They were broad Asian influences, and opium was supposed to be the fragrance that went along with the cloak. The bottle design was based on a Japanese scent case, and the entire design and press kit were overseen personally by Yves Saint Laurent. It was launched in France in 1977, and with a dangerous name that implied drugs, a sensual ad photographed by Helmut Newton and featuring model Jerry Hall, the perfume was an immediate hit. It earned $3 million in just 4 months, and remember, that's 1977 money. And while it was only for sale in France, it became a popular souvenir for tourists since it had this forbidden hype around it. People really thought that it had real opium in it, which was encouraged by the brand. As the perfume was getting more and more notoriety, outrage abroad ensued. The perfume was outright banned in both the Middle East and Australia, and at various times in China. In the United States, the American Coalition Against Opium and Drug Abuse, which was a committee comprised of Chinese Americans, boycotted the perfume and demanded an apology from Yves Saint Laurent. The reason they were so upset was because opium as a drug was kind of the equivalent of what we have in the USA with the opioid epidemic. Additionally, there were multiple wars between the United Kingdom, France, and China, dubbed the Opium Wars. Western countries defeated China in these wars, so it was basically rubbing salt on the open wound of history, not to mention that he was kind of consolidating multiple Asian cultures in this one release. Squibb, which was the company that owned the YSL fragrance division at the time, received appeals from Americans asking the name be changed. They considered it despite their heavy investment, but Yves himself said, "Opium or no perfume." Yves Saint Laurent did not apologize and doubled down 1 year later by throwing a decadent launch party in New York. A tall ship was rented from the South Street Seaport Museum, and they dubbed it the Peking and decorated it with statues of Buddha, hanging lanterns, 1,000 orchids flown in from Hawaii, and banners of gold, purple, and red silks. Cher was there, and Truman Capote sat at the ship's helm. People were doing cocaine below deck. At the end of the night, $30,000 worth of fireworks spelled out Yves Saint Laurent and opium before the party moved to Studio 54, which in turn was decorated to look like an opium den. In 1978, the book Orientalism was published, and this work was one of the first calling out the West for racist depictions of Asian people and culture. In the fragrance industry right now, calls have been getting louder for years, asking fragrance brands to rename the fragrance family Oriental, and many now call it amber or ambery. The last time I talked about this in my Guerlain video on Shalimar, someone accused me of being woke and too sensitive, which I don't really understand, because the way I see it, if someone is telling me that a word makes them feel bad or has racist connotations or brings up their culture's collective trauma from colonialism, I'm going to stop using it. YSL, however, never publicly said anything about this. In fact, the controversy led to such a frenzy that it increased the demand for the perfume. The perfume itself was big and bold, and it kind of ushered in what would become the behemoths of the 80s. And for a full circle moment, I talked about this in my video on Poison, but Yves Saint Laurent was Christian Dior's successor, and the House of Dior actually used opium as its inspiration when they created Poison. And then in 2014, a group of master perfumers, including Olivier Cresp and Honorine Blanc, created Black Opium, which has been a similar powerhouse of fragrance for younger generations. I'm going to end with a passage from Fabrice Thomas, who was driver, friend, and lover to Yves Saint Laurent. Between the smell of the drugs he was going to get from the Chinese man in Madeleine, the smells of alcohol, semen, and these overly heady fragrances, I just wanted to vomit. In the same addictive and exaggerated spirit, far from all measure, he could have coated himself with opium. But no, it's not for me, he said. Follow for more perfume history and catch the rest of the YSL playlist below.